4 years ago, a hiker disappeared on Mount Rainier in search of a secret cave holding mysteries and valuable artifacts. But what really happened on that dark journey? This case isn't what it seems. Stay with me until the end and discover the unexpected twists and turns. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more mysteries like this. Imagine the searing grief that gripped a mother and father when they lost their son so suddenly and mysteriously. 4 years ago, the hiker set out on a seemingly simple journey, but became lost in the Rainier Mountains, a place as treacherous as it was majestic. What seemed like a common adventure destination turned into a nightmare, leaving an open wound in the hearts of those who loved him. What can the pain of such a loss do to someone? How can they cope with the uncertainty of not knowing if he is alive or dead? A profound emptiness gripped his parents and friends. But perhaps worst of all was the eternal question: what really happened to him? His closest friends, those who had experienced every laugh and adrenaline rush alongside him, found themselves at a loss for answers, as if the mountain had stolen more than just a friend, but also their peace. He knew what he was doing. He was always so prepared, they said, as if these words could somehow fill the void. But the void was too great. What happened on the mountain could not be explained in words. Even those closest to him, those who truly knew him, were stuck with a single question that repeated itself tirelessly. Where is he? The grief wasn't limited to family and close friends, but also touched the entire local community. Mount Rainier, famous for its stunning scenery, also carries a reputation for being unforgiving. For those trying to help in the search, each new rescue attempt seemed like another impossible mission. The terrain, thick with constant fog, transformed the mountain into a maze with no exit. It was as if it swallowed everything it touched, including the dreams and hopes of those who still believed in a miracle. And then time passed, and rumors began to gain momentum. Some spoke of tragedy. Others said he had disappeared of his own free will. What was happening on Mount Rainier? And why had it left no clear sign of its passing? What had happened to the hiker? And why did no one seem to understand the extent of what was happening there? With each day without answers, the pain multiplied. It wasn't just the uncertainty of his disappearance, but the weight of doubt that caused even deeper suffering. The wait for an answer dragged on as if time had stood still. But the despair continued to grow, for there was always something more, a thought whispering that perhaps the walker was still out there, lost and struggling, or, somehow, already knew more than anyone could imagine. He, who had set out in search of something greater, now left all who loved him in a desperate search for the truth, hoping that, in the end, what had happened would be more than an unexplained tragedy. After months of searching, with no clear answers and ever-increasing questions piling up, the hiker's case seemed doomed to oblivion. Rescue teams had tirelessly explored the areas surrounding Mount Rainier, and authorities were on the verge of declaring the case closed. But as in many mystery stories, fate had a different plan, and the truth seemed to be waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. In 2023, a new expedition, this time organized by a group of explorers and researchers revisiting the mountain's ancient routes and trails, uncovered a crucial clue. An unexpected discovery reignited interest in the case, and the hiker's disappearance, which until then seemed like a never-ending story, gained new light. What they found in the cave was more than a simple clue. It was a turning point. In the area where previous searches had proved fruitless, a new cave was discovered, hidden beneath layers of rock and vegetation. At first glance, it seemed like an ordinary place, But as they delved deeper, the researchers soon noticed markings on the walls and some equipment, such as ropes and backpacks, that appeared to have belonged to the missing man himself. However, most intriguing of all was the fact that these items were well preserved, as if they had been used recently. This made no sense, since given the time that had passed since the disappearance, any object would have been at least partially deteriorated by the weather and humidity of the cave. What's more, a strange symbol was engraved on the wall, a design that no one could precisely identify, but which seemed to have some connection to ancient local legends. Could this be a vital clue or just a coincidence? None of the researchers had a clear answer. The air of mystery intensified. Previous theories, which pointed to an accident or even suicide, began to be challenged by these new discoveries. If the hiker had been there, why hadn't he left more traces of his passage? And if he had gotten lost, why hadn't he returned to areas closer to the main trail? The idea that he might have survived longer than previously thought gained traction, and with it, new speculation arose. Could he have found something inside the cave that made him change his plans? Or even more so, had he discovered something that led him to hide there for some unknown reason? What had previously seemed like a simple disappearance story now seemed like a complex enigma with multiple layers of mystery and new questions to be answered. The researchers knew they needed to further investigate this new cave and the objects found there. The presence of personal equipment and the enigmatic symbol indicated that the missing man had, for some reason, strayed from his planned route, perhaps in search of something or someone. But what could have motivated this change of direction? Some began to speculate that he was no longer alone, and that at some point he might have encountered another explorer or someone who helped him survive, while others believed he was searching for a scientific or archaeological discovery that had taken him deeper into the mountains than he had initially planned. However, nothing was certain. All the investigators had were more questions, more doubts, and a growing sense that the case was far from solved. As experts reviewed the images and data collected from the expedition, more clues began to emerge. Analysis of photos taken inside the cave revealed that its structure did not appear to be natural, as initially assumed. Some areas of the cave showed signs of human intervention, such as carved walls and narrow passages, which appeared to have been intentionally created rather than formed by natural erosion. This raised a previously unlikely hypothesis. The cave could have been used by humans or other ancient civilizations as a refuge or place of worship, and the hiker, upon finding this place, might have stumbled upon something much larger than he imagined. The possibility that he had made a valuable archaeological discovery became an increasingly strong theory. But if that were the case, why would he have disappeared without leaving a clear explanation? The mystery deepened. The cave, seemingly a simple exploration site, now appeared to be the center of a historical and scientific enigma. But as more details were analyzed, even more questions arose. The symbol found on the cave wall, which seemed to have a hidden meaning, was identified as a type of rock art, with characteristics similar to some forms of writing from ancient local civilizations. This raised the idea that the hiker perhaps unknowingly was searching for something many others had sought before him, a key to a secret lost to time.